A vampire awakens from a long sleep in a research facility and embarks on a quest to uncover the reasons for her imprisonment and the meaning behind her visions. The war between lycans and vampires has been ongoing for centuries. Selene, a vampire who worked for a vampire elder named Victor, is determined to eliminate all lycans as revenge for the death of her family. However, she falls in love with a hybrid named Michael Corvin. To protect him, Selene kills 2 vampire elders, Victor and Marcius. The couple's forbidden love has made them central figures in the war. 12 years ago, humans discovered the existence of vampires and lycans and began hunting them down using silver nitrate ammunition and ultraviolet rays. To escape the purge, Selene and Michael plan to meet on a pier and board a ship together. Selene fights her way through a high-rise building to reach the docks, where she sees armed men ready to attack Michael. She warns him of the danger, but he is shot with a silver bullet and falls into the water. Selene jumps after him, and they are separated by a specialized UV explosive. Injured, Selene loses consciousness. Years later, Selene wakes up to chaos and escapes from her cryogenic chamber. She wonders where she is and discovers that another subject has escaped the facility. The people in the laboratory panic, and Dr. Jacob Lane orders his men to sedate Selene. However, Selene outsmarts them and breaks into the main laboratory. She apprehends one of the doctors and asks about Michael's whereabouts. When another doctor attacks her, she fights back and escapes. Selene takes out multiple guards while searching for an exit. She jumps out of a window and overhears a man ordering the guards not to shoot her. Selene holds onto the back of a passing truck and sees the name of the facility, Antigen. Later, she breaks into a shop and grabs a trench coat. She returns to the docks but finds it abandoned. A guard informs her that it has been closed for 12 years. Selene has a telepathic connection with someone who is in pain and believes it is Michael. She desperately tries to locate him. Meanwhile, the police surround the same injured man that Selene saw. During their conversation, Detective Sebastian and his junior detective Johnson are investigating the possibility that a lycan might be responsible for the incident. Sebastian expresses doubt, as it has been years since they last encountered a lycan. However, their conversation is interrupted when Sebastian receives a phone call about an incident at Antigen. Unbeknownst to them, Selene, a vampire, observes from above and descends when the detectives leave the scene. Among the onlookers, a man with electric blue eyes quietly follows her. At Antigen, Sebastian questions Dr. Lane, the owner of the corporation, about the incident. Sebastian had received a witness report claiming that something had escaped from the laboratory, but Dr. Lane denies it. He assures Sebastian that he would have informed the authorities if there was a major incident, as public safety is their top priority. Dr. Lane tries to gain sympathy from Sebastian by mentioning that he lost his son to a lycan. Later, Johnson shows Sebastian a picture of Selene escaping from the Antigen building, proving that Dr. Lane was lying. Meanwhile, Selene visits the man who had let her go and asks about Subject 2, confirming that they are a hybrid. The man also reveals that Selene and Subject 2 have a connection, as they can see through each other's eyes. After getting the answers she needs, Selene forcefully throws the man out of the building, and he lands on a car in the street. As Selene leaves, she has another vision of someone escaping from the police through a vent. The dealer rushes to the location, while the blue-eyed man continues to stalk Selene. Inside the vent, the man loses sight of Selene and encounters lycans lurking around. He tries to hide, but Selene finds him. She demands to know why he is following her, and the man, named David, reveals that he is also a vampire by changing his eye color. David discusses the current situation of the declining vampire covens and the few remaining lycans who have resorted to lurking. Round the underground tunnels on comes to Selene. This time, the person is being attacked by a couple of lycans, cornering the person to a dead end. Fearing for Michael's safety, she hurriedly runs to the person's rescue, easily defeating the werewolves. Reaching the shadowy corridor, Selene finds a girl cowering by a wall instead of Michael. David and Selene take the girl with them and the man suggests taking them back to their coven. Selene is driving the van with David in the front passenger seat, while the scared girl is in the back. Suddenly, 3 lycans chase after them, leaving a path of destruction in their path as they desperately try to reach the vehicle. The 3 werewolves reach the van despite Selene's best efforts to evade them. When one of the creatures gets inside the van and bites the girl, she transforms into a hybrid, surprising Selene. After successfully subduing their attackers, Selene has David drive the rest of the way, while she attends to the injured girl, whose wound wasn't healing. Elsewhere, Detective Sebastian is investigating Selene through photos and video surveillance footage. The girl says the doctors told her she was an orphan, but because of her psychic connection with Selene, Subject 2, or Eve, never believed any of their lies. One day, she heard of the doctor's plan to end her life and that her mother was in one of the chambers, prompting Eve to wake Selene from her slumber. Selene realizes that Eve is her daughter with Michael, and she gave birth in captivity. However, Selene feels detached from the fast pace of the unraveling information and instead coldly asks her daughter about Michael's location. Surprised by her mother's indifference, Eve tells her that she has no idea where he is, prompting Selene to forcefully access her memory by drinking her blood. Later, they enter an underground coven and David lays Eve down on the altar, asking the others to call Olivia, a healer. An older vampire, Thomas, appears and berates David for bringing Selene to their coven. The vampire leader, and David's father, points out that Selene is the primary reason for the vampires' near extinction, because she betrayed their kind and killed 2 elders for a hybrid. David defends Selene by saying that their clan was the one who betrayed the death dealer. Then, Olivia arrives and hurriedly tends to Eve. Olivia tells them that the girl is weak and suggests feeding her. She offers Eve her own blood, which Eve hesitates to drink, but eventually consumes, before falling unconscious. Witnessing Eve's uniqueness, Thomas questions the girl's identity since he knows of Selene's hybrid lover. However, Selene refuses to answer and tells him she'll leave with her daughter the next day. Later, Selene mournfully considers the possibility of Michael's demise, as she remains confused about her daughter's existence. Then, David joins her and says he knew of her identity as a death dealer. Selene thanks the vampire for his help in rescuing her daughter, despite his knowledge of what she is. He asks her to help train the young vampires to protect the coven, but Selene warns him that Thomas wouldn't allow it. David believes there is a need for change to ensure their species' survival. He even asks her to take him along when they leave. Meanwhile, Eve wakes up from her slumber, and she roams around the empty hall. Thomas suddenly appears behind her, and says he knows of her true identity. Later, Thomas informs them of the Lycans' near extinction due to their foolish retaliation to the humans, which further convinces him to steer clear of any conflict. The 2 men argue, and David accuses his father of being a coward, angering Thomas. Concurrently, Eve slices her arm and watches the wounds heal quickly. When Selene enters, she immediately tells her daughter to stop what she's doing, but Eve confesses that her mother's cold treatment has hurt her. Opening up, Selene says she's still coming to terms with the fact that she has a daughter, and that Michael, the love of her life, is gone. The vampire further explains that her heart is not cold but broken, making Eve accept her mother's apology. Suddenly, a loud crash resounds through the coven, and Eve becomes alert, stating intruders have arrived. Selene tells her to stay in the locked room, as she heads out to join the other vampires. The combatant vampires gear up, under David's leadership, to anticipate the humans' attack. while Thomas leads the others to safety. Selene plans to escape with Eve to lure the humans away, while David gets ready to fight. However, they are surprised to find themselves at the mercy of multiple Lycans instead of humans, catching them off guard. Outnumbered, the werewolves quickly subdue the vampires. However, a few vampires manage to escape alongside David, who suffered a werewolf bite. As Selene returns with Eve, she asks for his help to protect her daughter, while she fights the remaining Lycans. From a tunnel covered by a thin curtain, Selene hears a resounding roar. A colossal shadow appears before her, and from the tunnel emerges an unnaturally gigantic werewolf. The Lycan attacks Selene with its monstrous strength. The Death Dealer is able to injure the creature, but she's ultimately no match for the imposing beast. Selene falls unconscious after receiving a massive hit from the monster. Moments later, Selene wakes up and finds out that Thomas had given up her daughter to the Lycans to cease the fight. Selene tries to chase after Eve, but she's too late. Selene returns to the coven where Thomas blames her for another coven's downfall and his son's death. Enraged, Selene tells the older vampire that Eve is the only living direct descendant of Alexander Corvinus, the founding father, and she fears the worst of what the werewolves will do to her. She adds that Thomas is the one who failed their species, because, at least, David knew Eve was worth dying for. She makes an incision on David's torso, inserts her hand into the cut, squeezes David's lifeless heart, and brings it back to life. David gasps awake, surprising the remaining vampires. Later, Selene holds dead Sebastian at gunpoint, and she wonders why the man doesn't seem surprised after she tells him a vampire coven was attacked by Lycans last night. Sebastian invites her into his office, telling her of his suspicion regarding the werewolves' power in the government. However, Selene, skimming the files, has a different theory and thinks antigen might be behind everything. The two plan and gear up to save Eve from the Lycans. On their way to antigen, Selene finds out that the detective's wife was once a vampire who took her own life by basking in sunlight because of the purge. Selene now understands why the detective is sympathetic to the vampire's cause. Outside the building, Selene waltzes into the elevator as the guards panic and sound the alarm, surprised the vampire is attacking in daylight. Meanwhile, Dr. Lane is preparing to operate on Eve, planning to harvest her organs to use her genes to create a silver vaccine. The operation stops when Selene activates the silver gas bombs on every floor. Dr. Lane hurriedly transports the unconscious Eve, and orders his son, Quint, to hunt down the vampire. She rushes to reach her daughter, while Dr. Lane and his men transport her to the van in the basement parking lot. Meanwhile, Sebastian watches the happenings through the CCTV monitors as he communicates with Selene about her daughter's whereabouts. As the fight between Lycans and Selene ignites, the communication signal between the two becomes spotty, taking down any Lycan that comes her way, while catching up to her daughter. Selene sees a cryogenic chamber encasing Michael. With the imminent danger to Eve's life, Selene can only shoot at the glass to let the icy mist escape, hoping it'll effectively defrost her sleeping lover. Meanwhile, the detective is unable to get a hold of the vampire, so he grabs a rifle and drives to the basement, intending to stop the realizing that she left the explosive in the basement inside his body. Dr. Lane has Quint tries to pry open his already healed when Sebastian's stomach, but it's too late, and he perishes from the silver grenade explosion from within. After defeating their opponents, Selene and Eve hug each other. Hearing all the commotion outside, Sebastian tells them to leave, while he distracts the police. Selene thanks the detective for his help and goes back inside the building. Returning to where she found Michael's chamber, she sees that it's empty. All of a sudden, Eve experiences a vision from someone else, a view from the building. Rooftop. They immediately head to the location but find no one there. Knowing that both humans and Lycans will be searching for Michael, Selene vows to find him first.